Alright guys, MicroStrategy has been getting absolutely killed, down nearly 10% yesterday and further today as a result of Bitcoin also falling a great deal off of its high in October. Holding this stock has not been very good. You're down around 70% now from the peak in 2025, so just absolutely brutal. Let's do some analysis on this stock, on Bitcoin as well. You can't really analyze MicroStrategy without a view on where Bitcoin is going, but I think I'll have some interesting insights for you, so let's jump into it. So worth noting, we are in a downwards parallel channel. Price has been respecting that. This is how I would draw it in. So I would very much expect a strong bounce if you made a break for the bottom of this parallel channel around $115, a little bit less, 113, depending on where you hit it. You know, if it's going to be later on in the year, perhaps March, then you might be bouncing from $100 or so. And that leads me to the next bit of confluence with that, which is there is a very strong amount of support at this line here around the $100 level. So if you can see here, the parallel channel and the this strong level of support do line up around $100, and that's a psychological level, a nice round number. People may see, oh, MicroStrategy is at $100. Let me grab some of that. I think that could be a very nice place to buy. You've got multiple factors working in your favor. If we do get down there, I will show you how, where that price could correspond to on the Bitcoin chart as well. And guys, the other thing I'd like to pay attention to here, there is a very nice trend line that I'm looking at, which could signal that we're actually in for a potential bottom here of some kind, potential bounce from this level you see here, drawing this trend line up based on where the stock initially ran from. That is quite often a good place for buyers to step in. And if you see here, we're kind of trading around that line. So again, keep this yellow line in mind when I show you the Bitcoin chart, because there's some levels there that will correspond to potentially we could get a bounce from here. So if you're being optimistic, yeah, maybe we can come back up, get back up to the 20-day EMA or what have you, or maybe even above that. But that's very much the optimistic view. The pessimistic view is that, yeah, we're probably going to be coming down at some point to around $100, maybe less, depending on how violent of a move you get, whether you're bleeding out or just crashing down. I would imagine a bit more of a slow bleed down to that $100 level over the next couple of months. Okay, so that's the analysis of MicroStrategy. But let me pull in Bitcoin just to give you some perspective on that and how that looks on the Bitcoin chart as well. So the first yellow line that we were looking at, where we may get a bounce here, you can see that corresponds to this level here, essentially where we've bounced as a potential sort of double bottom in this particular range that we've been trading in. It's been sort of a bear flag that's played out, and we are now here. So the optimistic view again is, okay, well, maybe we've put in a double bottom here and we can actually see price head back higher. You've got this sort of distribution or accumulation phase, I should say, here, and then perhaps price can revert back up. So that's the optimistic view, that you may be a buyer here and price can get a nice bounce, whether that's a short-term bounce or perhaps some renewed upside. That's the optimistic view. Now, I think the more realistic view is, target we're looking here on Bitcoin is this trend line, which we're going to find gets us to around $60,000. I think that can be quite a reasonable target. Not a huge drawdown, because you've not had a massive blow off top as you often do with Bitcoin, but that would be a 50% off the highs. I think that's reasonable. You might even go a bit lower. So yeah, I'd be looking at this as the sort of equivalent to the $100 MicroStrategy price. Now, of course, if you break below this on Bitcoin, you will have the possibility of going even lower on MicroStrategy. So keep that in mind. This is not accounting for the worst case scenario on Bitcoin, where you just can't really find support here and you're dropping, I don't know, maybe to $30,000, $40,000, something like this, perhaps even lower, depending on how bad things get. And if MicroStrategy is being pressured in terms of their average buy price being quite high, and maybe their MNAV will compress below 1, and all the rest of it, there can be, of course, downside more than we've already said. But regardless, the other level that I'm looking at on Bitcoin is actually around this sort of $73,000, $72,000 level, and sort of a range all the way to 69,000. I could draw a sort of range in here, so something between these sort of levels is where I'm potentially looking at a potential buy on Bitcoin, and maybe you get a bounce from those sort of levels. So this could correspond to the bottom part of the parallel channel on MicroStrategy. Let's say you moved down here 16% or so. That could very well correspond to an equivalent move on MSTR of 16, 18%, something like this. So I could imagine we get down there, we get a bounce, if I'm just sort of thinking about where price could go, you can bounce off here, come back up to here, and then, head back down to the $100 mark. That's something that I'm very much keeping possibilities open to. But yeah, I think there is a temptation here to buy this level. I think the sentiment is really, really bad at the moment. The other chart I have, guys, this is a very interesting chart you've maybe not seen, which is the Bitcoin to gold chart. Now, if we take a look at this, this basically represents the idea that Bitcoin is potentially a new form of gold, of hard currency, and it's essentially been performing better than gold over time, right? If you look at the price, then we can see that gold has been underperforming Bitcoin over the long term. So for that trend to continue, it is essentially keeping the Bitcoin as a store of value narrative intact. And interestingly, guys, we are seemingly fighting at this trend line. So if you've had a big sell-off on gold, Bitcoin not selling off quite as much potentially, and maybe we even get a bit of a bounce on Bitcoin here, that could send this ratio higher, which would indicate that the story for Bitcoin is still intact. I think that would be a very bullish sign, and even if you do then bleed out further on Bitcoin, I think it would be giving confidence to buy the dip on Bitcoin and buy those previous levels on MicroStrategy as well that I alluded to previously. So watching this chart as well, that's Bitcoin over gold, and very important chart. If we get a breakdown here, then it's not a good sign for Bitcoin. It's going to be showing you essentially that the narrative of Bitcoin as a store of wealth is very much dead, and it's just a speculative asset that has, long-term underperformed gold essentially, or not underperformed necessarily, but just not really related to gold in that narrative sense. I hope these charts are helpful. A bit of a deep dive on Bitcoin and MicroStrategy, but yeah. The synopsis is, look for a potential bounce here. I wouldn't be surprised. For the optimists out there, you can get a bounce at this point. Short term, definitely possible. Longer term, we are looking at moves down to 110 to $100 essentially on MicroStrategy, which would correspond to a bottom potentially around 60,000 in Bitcoin. But you may have a bottom higher depending on how Bitcoin moves, maybe around 115 on MicroStrategy, something like this. So keep your chin up if you're in the stock. If you're thinking of buying, then hopefully these levels will be very helpful for you. I'm certainly going to be considering some large, positions, maybe some leverage positions, options or whatever at these sort of levels, but not financial advice. Do your own due diligence, of course. And thanks for watching, guys. Subscribe for more charts every day, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.